Oh, you're trying to get into real estate? Nah, let's be serious. You're not trying to get into real estate. If you're not already in there, tough luck, buddy. See, earlier this month, Hana Bank released some data that indicated that first-time housing market buyers have dropped substantially in recent years. This is the first time the rate has dropped as such since the government began making legislative attempts to lower the barrier for people looking to buy a first house. How'd they do it? Low interest rates on mortgages and lowered regulation of loans, as well as lowering of acquisition and transfer taxes. See, these initiatives worked really well in the short term, but first-time homebuyers are down in large numbers since they started going up in 2015. So, why is that? Here are my thoughts. What's really good, fam? You're watching Seoul, and these are my thoughts on Korea's housing market. I'm gonna call this episode The Real Estate Paradox. Before I keep going, I'd just like to ask you to scroll down, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and please let me know that I'm not talking into a void. Also, click through to my channel where I have a few videos explaining how to actually do some basic financial things to help foreigners get money right now in the Republic of Korea. Alright, let's get it. I'm gonna take you back to 2012. The Korean housing market has been gradually sinking while property values were also steadily decreasing. Tight regulations on lending rules also made it more difficult for those without capital to actually buy a house, leading to a situation of high supply and low demand. This is the opposite of a concept that we talked about in a past episode, namely inflation. See, inflation is where demand is significantly higher than supply. In 2012, the housing market was exhibiting properties of the opposite, deflation. See, deflation is the situation where supply is greater than demand. Due to anti-speculation policies and highly regulated loan practices, real estate demand was low. So while the governments at the time were successful at keeping housing prices down, they actually lowered the purchasing demand unintentionally. Alright, let's do a thingy. So here's Jack. Jack has a bunch of money that he's looking to put into an asset that will guarantee him growth over the next few years. He's considering speculating on real estate for the long term. Now on the next side we have our homie Vivian. Vivian's looking to buy a house for herself and her family because she realizes that her jeonse payment is simply losing value the longer it sits in her landlord's bank account. Jack does a once-over of potential properties that he can buy, but sees that the prices have been spiraling over the past few years. If he buys a property, chances are it'll just be an expense that loses value over the course of the next few years. Plus, with the government opening bogeumjari apartments that are locked up with heavy anti-speculation measures, i.e. the houses are for living in and not for buying and selling, there seems to be no end in sight for the spiraling of housing prices. Jack says no. Next we have Vivian. Vivian got in late on the bogeumjari applications and missed out. She can't afford a proper loan because she already put her savings in her initial jeonse payment, and she can't afford the deposit on a regular loan, so she just puts off buying a new apartment for the time being. This was the housing market back then. The government was clear that residential estate was only for housing and not for making money, and priority was for those who didn't yet own a house, which pushed the market even further down as high interest loans on low cost housing filled that gap. Those caught in the middle? Well, tough luck. Fast forward to 2013. A year after the Lee Myung-bak administration eased regulations on loans, the Park Geun-hye administration further aimed to stimulate housing purchases by easing requirements on the loan to value ratio and the debt to income ratio. This led to a surge in housing purchases among first-time owners who could finally qualify for previously out-of-reach loans. Now, our buddy Vivian could secure a loan that she couldn't in the past, albeit a more risky one from the perspective of the bank. As a result, first-time buyers got to buy new apartments that were suddenly affordable. Speculators got to buy new apartments at lower interest rates and saw a market that was set to boom. As a result of these changes, household debt has doubled in the past 10 years from 776 trillion won at the end of 2009 to just shy of a quadrillion 600 trillion big ass number by the end of last year. As stated in my video about my thoughts on the Korean market, efforts by Moon Jae-in's administration to curb the rising debt and housing bubble have done little to nothing to affect the bananas level of household income and real estate speculation in the country. Now let's look at what happened real quick, because it's something that seems to be happening around the world, and part of why I'm not convinced that the housing market is really as safe of a place to park money as many have made it seem. So, by lowering interest rates, homebuyers like Vivian who wouldn't have been able to or wouldn't have wanted to make payments at the previous rate of interest would actually be able to get into the market. Let's play around with some numbers for a sec to make it more tangible. So imagine the house that Viv wanted to buy was hovering around 450 million back in 2012, and she got a 30-year fixed rate mortgage structured at 4.5% interest. this would mean that she would have to make monthly payments of around 2,150,000 won. At the time, the price was too much for her and she couldn't make the purchase that she wanted. Now let's fast forward a year, and now the interest rate has dropped all the way down to 2.3% interest on her loan. Now Viv only has to pay 1.7 mil per month, which she can afford, especially when combining her income with her partner's. Vivian is quick on the draw, gets to the bank, secures her loan, and gets her house. Everyone is happy. And the thing is, Viv isn't the only person who made note of the changes, and we see a bump in both loans and new homeware purchases back in 2013. All things considered, the government initiatives to stimulate the housing market were a success. Now let's fast forward 3 years, and Viv tells her brother Carter that with the rates as low as they are, it's best that he get into the market before they go back up again. Carter goes to check out properties that he was looking at last year, and lo and behold, motherfuckers are gassed up 30% under speculative ownership. Instead of the 450 million that Viv paid, them shits are now 585 million. Now, even though the interest rate is still down at 2.3, my guy would have to pay 2,250,000 won per month, and he would have to take out multiple more risky loans at much higher interest rates, which he doesn't want to do. For all intents and purposes, he's effectively priced out of that neighborhood. Though not really ideal, Carter finds a place in another neighborhood a little further out of town that's more in his price range. That place also cost 450, even though it cost 375 3 years before. Lucky for him, inflation in less popular areas hasn't happened as rapidly yet. As an aside, these prices have been flying, as we can see in this graphic from the Chosun Ilbo in September 2020. According to their data, the average price of an apartment in Seoul is now 1.8 billion won, or about 920,000 US dollars. But anyway, that represents a 55% growth since 2017, where the average price was about only 600 million won. Carter makes a savvy decision and buys in before the prices get any higher. Congratulations to him. Now let's bring it back to Jack. Jack couldn't find anything promising, so he just put his capital in the stock market, but he hasn't really been seeing much in the way of returns in the past few years. Meanwhile, his homie Viv has seen her apartment value shoot through the roof in the same time frame. Jack says fuck it, pulls his money out of the stock market, and starts speculating on real estate now that it's affordable, accessible, and more promising. He's not the only one either. More speculators with liquid capital see the housing market skyrocketing as more and more people get loans and the economy continues to grow. More people can afford the interest on their loans, so they also start competing for real estate as well, further driving up the price. Now, instead of the deflationary period, which, remember, means low demand, high supply, we're in an inflationary period of high demand and low supply. Government economists see the problem arising and begin to curb speculators by adding extra taxes to those who own multiple properties. Speculators, resourceful as always, dodge these taxes by gifting their properties to their children or putting them into trusts. None of this does anything to drop prices, and young, first-time homeowners are still priced out of the market. So, the government returns to the well that worked the last time. They drop rates and increase loan accessibility. People already rich off the previous real estate investments dominate the market even further, and now we have a situation where the prices are really high, but also really far ahead of inflation. Over that time, mortgage prices have gotten so high that it's even less realistic for regular young people to own the property in which they live. That is to say, the well is now dry. And I guess that's where we are now. It might interest you to know that this problem isn't exclusive to Korea. The same problem has arisen in the US and Canada, although for slightly different reasons, and it's inherently self-perpetuating. See, it's easy for a government to say more people can have more loans for cheaper, because people want their loans and they want them affordable as well. What's more difficult, for very obvious reasons, is taking them away. On top of all of this, the problems that come out of artificially low interest rates and high household debt are macro in nature and are, on a very day-to-day basis, pretty intangible to the average person. Conversely, not being able to get a loan can mean not being able to take care of your family or ever put yourself in a place to set yourself up for real financial success. So, should we be surprised that apartments are now priced so ridiculously high as to be out of reach to the average person? I don't think so. This is an international phenomenon that seems like an inevitable outcome of free market capitalism. What can we do to stop it, short of reinstating the regulations that existed 15 years ago and led to a deflationary market that spurred the initial legislative changes in the first place? I don't really know. But if you think you know, please scroll down, leave a comment in the comment section, and tell us what you think, because in my opinion, the market looks really dangerous. Somebody needs to bite the bullet. Somebody needs to make the unpopular decision to fix this self-perpetuating problem. Otherwise, the bubble's gonna pop. because bubbles pop, and we've seen what happens when countries don't take any real actions to prevent it. Government regulations have been increasing, but with inflation at almost zero and values still continuing to rise, there's little reason to believe that the trend in unaffordability will reverse. Some experts suggest further loosening loan regulations, but I'm gonna let you decide how you feel about that. Alright guys, that's enough for me today. I hope you found this interesting, educational, or at least a decent enough noise generator to make up for the silence of being alone in your apartment scrolling through Facebook wondering why the demographic of active users seems to be getting more toxic as November nears. If you have any thoughts, scroll down and leave a note in the comment section below. Otherwise, try to keep in mind, houses are meant to be lived in. When I've been talking about inflation and deflation and supply and demand, I haven't been talking about the physical apartments or the physical houses because those have always been in plenty supply. Houses for living aren't the concern of the real estate market. Happy Chuseok, everyone.